Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes him pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's facts. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best. I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
Welcome back to episode 142 of the Last Round Podcast, coming off a weekend of fights in Ohio, in Cleveland, Ohio, between Jake Paul and MMA legend and Hall of Famer Tyrone Woodley. The YouTubers are back, Mike. I think we have to, especially since he got the win. Obviously, we'll dive into it, but especially since he got the win, we're going to have to get used to seeing these guys, the Paul brothers, a lot more often on boxing platforms, all over boxing, media sites, and boxing news sites. We're just going to have to get used to them for the time being, because it doesn't seem like they're going anywhere, especially with those personalities and still adding wins to their tallies. But this week, we have a special guest. He's the managing editor and also a writer for nyfights.com joining us this week. He used to live in Southern California, but he left us, unfortunately. So now we can't meet up at fights here in the LA area, but I'm sure he'll be back in the coming months eventually to catch a fight here with his LA colleagues. Abraham Gonzalez of nyfights.com joins us this week. Thanks for joining us, Abe.
Hey, gents, how you doing, man? I appreciate you guys having me. It's been so long since I've been on the show, man, but thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, we were just talking about just before we started recording here that the first time we had you on was at the StubHub Center in Carson, California. And I remember I botched your last name. I called you Abe Lopez instead of Gonzalez, man.
Yeah, I remember that. You guys set up an impromptu at the one of the suites up top, and it was definitely dope.
Yeah, but we appreciate it. So here, your second time here on the Last Round. So jumping right into it, this past Sunday, a rare Sunday event, the 29th of August, from the Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse in Cleveland, Ohio, on Showtime pay-per-view. The main event, Jake Paul gets the split decision over the UFC's and MMA's Tyrone Woodley in front of a pretty packed house from what looked like it on TV. Abe, we'll start with you. What'd you think about this matchup, and what's your overall take on Jake Paul and his brother Logan Paul?
I tell you, the matchup was, I started losing interest after like the second round. They just weren't doing anything and kind of moving around. And then I think it was the fourth round when Woodley caught him with that left hook. And then I thought, yes, this is going to now get interesting. And then it didn't. The atmosphere sounded crazy right from the start. They were loud. They were cheering Tommy Fury like he was the main event when he came into the ring. I was like, what is going on here? And some people, I think it was Carlos Toro, was there ringside. He kind of mentioned that seemed like it was more of a UFC crowd than anything else, which makes sense, right? Because of Woodley. And it's an interesting thing. They had about 8 million searches on Google or streams of their numbers are ridiculous, and they're going to keep getting opportunities because there is interest there. I saw people that don't watch boxing at all posting all night long, and I was like, wow. But there's interest there. They just have to be very careful on how they matchmake him in the future.
Mike, what'd you think?
No, I thought Abe kind of summed it up really well. It was good to see, most boxing cards we go to, the crowd doesn't really appear till the main event. So it was kind of good to see that the crowd was there really from the first bell all the way to the last bell. It's just going to be, it seems to be like a different sort of crowd. Obviously, like a younger sort of people who, really follow the YouTube world. It's just going to be good to see whether they kind of stick around when eventually, Jake does lose and decides to walk away.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with Abe's sentiment as well. I started losing interest in it. I'd be remiss if I didn't say that, when these guys started coming into the sport and really started getting opportunities to fight, in real boxing matches on these big platforms, you know, as a hardcore boxing fan that like we are, I was like, what are you guys doing? But then, you know, then we try to think about the business side of the sport, and they're like, okay, well, these kids draw money. So there's no more, excuse me, there's no more Mayweather. You know, Floyd Mayweather isn't a constant in this sport anymore. I mean, he still pops up here and there, maybe once every 2 years to do like a novelty act like he did with Logan Paul and stuff like that. But these Paul brothers are young, and they've shown that they have some level of skill in the boxing ring. I mean, I can give them that, especially Jake Paul, the younger brother. I can give him that it seems like he's improved over these 4 fights. So I can give him that, because that's what I wanted to see. I was like, okay, well, can this kid improve? Like, is he really training? Is he working on his craft? And he's, you know, like Abe said, they had the attention of people all over the internet, all over the world in a sense. You know, the Google searchers, the Google trends, people who don't even watch boxing are there, you know, maybe less than casual fans were talking about it. That happened to me too. There was a lot of people who would ask me like, oh, you know, what do you think about Jake Paul? You know, what do you think about this upcoming fight and stuff like that? So, and we know that's a pretty good barometer for us as boxing media members to gauge how a fighter or a personality in the sport of boxing is viewed, you know, in terms of the general public. When people are asking, you know, when's the last time, Abe, what do you think is the last time we've had somebody like that, you know, excluding, I guess, Pacquiao at the moment, where a regular person from the general public would ask you like, hey, you know, so-and-so's fighting this weekend, you know, what do you think? You know, just because the media is all over the place. When do you think is the last time we had a fighter like that?
Ooh, to be honest, I think when I was in New York, back in Cotto's early days, I was getting a lot of that. And Cotto didn't have the name recognition, but casual people, you know, I was in New York in the Bronx, and, you know, casual people were like, hey, you know, from the Latin community, hey, when is Cotto fighting again? And, you know, it was just like, okay, like, you know, you're asking about a guy that's not even, you know, a main draw. But I think it was off the heels of Felix Trinidad, and people were just wanting to latch on to the next, you know, big Puerto Rican star or potential. And so I think that was the last one. But in more recent times, I've been getting a lot of that from Edgar Berlanga, believe it or not. Edgar Berlanga, you know, a lot of New York guys that I know that really don't watch boxing like that, they'll ask me, hey, you know, I heard about this Edgar Berlanga guy. I seen, you know, when's he fighting again? And those type of things. So I'm definitely interested in how he progresses moving forward. But there are people that are into him right now from the tri-state area, but he's done a good job of building up from within his region, and then now, you know, beginning to possibly spread out.
I would think, and you guys tell me if you agree or not, but I would think right now, in addition to the Paul brothers, I think the Paul brothers are definitely probably number 1, number 2, respectively. But maybe right there with them or right behind them is Ryan Garcia, just because he kind of has a grasp of that kind of same audience that they have in a way. And he's like, you know, he became friends with them over the last few years, and, you know, he's been on their videos and their posts and stuff like that. So their fans have become his fans. That's who I get it from, you know, the general public, from just regular people who don't watch, they don't know who Edgar Berlanga is or anything like that, or, you know, or Ivan Baranchik, who fought on this card, is, you know, like us, like we do. But I've gotten it with Ryan Garcia, like, oh, you know, what do you think about that Ryan Garcia kid? Or like, oh, he's fighting next weekend. What do you think he's going to win? He's undefeated and he has all these knockouts. But what I've noticed with that is sometimes it's mostly older people who have kids, who is the demographic for like a Ryan Garcia social media era, and the Paul brothers. And they say, oh yeah, well, my daughter or my son, like they told me about him, like, oh, dad, mom, this kid's a boxer. And I looked him up. I was like, oh, he's pretty good, you know? So, I mean, for me, in addition to them, it'd probably be Ryan Garcia in terms of notoriety. And, if you want to throw in Gervonta Davis, I've gotten stuff about him too. But I've gotten a lot more stuff about Ryan Garcia in addition to the Paul brothers. What do you think, Mike?
Oh, I agree. I mean, if any casual boxing fan at work hits me up, it's normally to do with, Ryan Garcia. And then, aside from Ryan Garcia, probably Christopher Lovejoy. He's probably the next biggest name.
Everywhere, worldwide, right?
Yeah.
Worldwide. One Shot Lovejoy, best nickname in boxing, man. Abe, so the scores for this fight were 77-75, 78-74 for Paul, and one judge saw it at 77-75 for Tyrone Woodley. Did you agree with that score? And if you didn't, what was your score? How'd you see it?
I thought that Jake Paul won the fight. Whether it was super close or not, it's kind of hard to tell when you got two guys that lack the experience, right? So it's hard to keep that focused eye on a fight that shouldn't be a main event. And so, but I think Paul won the fight. And they'll probably do a rematch, but I mean the scorecards were okay. I mean it wasn't a robbery of any sorts, and Paul won the fight. And he's just happy with that.
Do we know how long his deal is with Showtime? Abe, are you aware of any of those details, or have they released them and we're just not aware of them?
Yeah, no, those details are tight-lipped. We've been trying to get Steven Espinoza, on the hook to maybe get some of those things flushed out, but he hasn't necessarily been available. But I haven't heard anything as far as what that deal consists of. Yeah.
I mean, I'm assuming that they have him for quite a few events. They'd be stupid not to. Now that he's seen that he could, he does good business. But we'll see how it goes. Following this fight, they had their Ariel Helwani of MMA Fighting interviewed them. He was the in-ring interviewer, and then they kind of got into a scuffle, talked about a rematch, and then Jake Paul says "Oh, get a tattoo of my name on you, and then I'll give you the rematch." Kind of adding to the WWE-esque of the show's personality, of the matchup's personality. Do you think we see a rematch, Abe, or does Jake Paul go in another direction?
I think we see a rematch, but if we don't see the rematch, I think they take the Fury fight in the UK because, and I don't know this to be true, and Mike might be able to enlighten us a little more on it, but supposedly Fury is this big reality TV show star in the UK, and Paul fighting in the UK against this guy will make big business over there, probably put it on regular Showtime here, and it'll be an event. And if I'm Showtime and I'm trying to maximize the dollars of this contract, a rematch with Woodley, we already saw it. But a fight with Fury in the UK, now people are interested.
Mike, Abe's right. I think we've touched on this on past episodes. Tommy Fury has a pretty decent profile in the UK, right?
Yeah, he was on Love Island, the UK version of Love Island, where they go on there and meet girls. And I think he met his now girlfriend on that show, and he became pretty popular from that. And obviously, being Tyson Fury's younger brother as well. In comparison, he's got 3.6 million followers on Instagram, if that means anything.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it does mean something now in this day and age. The last couple of years, of course, it definitely means something. But I agree with Abe. I think Mike and I touched on this last week, where obviously Jake Paul is, I would say he's, overall the A side for that fight. He definitely is. So he'd probably, see that the guy's kind of all over the place too. I feel like he'd be like, "Oh, let's go to the UK." So, but I agree. I agree with Abe. I mentioned that to Mike last week that I feel this fight, that potential fight in the future, whether it's next or 2 fights down the line for them, should go to the UK. I feel that's the most bang for your buck that you can get, especially with the attention. And then, like Abe said, when Tommy Fury came out at that event this past Sunday, he got a big reaction. So I'm sure Frank Warren and Queensberry, they see that. I'm sure Frank Warren has money signs in his eyes, like, okay, we got to get Fury in there with Jake Paul soon and kind of get it there. But Mike, I think you touched on last week, or I don't know if you touched on it or I saw like a stat or something, but like a lot of Tommy Fury's opponents have had losing records. Am I wrong at that? Or Abe, is that true?
Yeah, I saw the same stat out there on social media. I think it is true. But at this point, for a fight like that, it doesn't even really matter. I mean, the advertising companies are going to be lined out the door waiting to jump on that. They want a piece of this Paul action, and it's just as simple as that.
Yeah, that's true. What do you think, Mike? Does it land in the UK?
I think listening to what Jake said and kind of reading between the lines, they're going to see how the pay-per-view did in the UK for this one, and obviously if Tommy Fury attracted a lot of buys, then they may do it. But he's really just looking round for the biggest kind of celebrities that he can get into the ring that he can probably beat. So I think that's why he probably won't fight Paul-Woodley again. I think he'll move on to something new, and the UK would be good, and Tommy Fury would probably be the best opponent for him. But Tommy has a little bit of a boxing background, so does he come unstuck if he takes that fight? Did he just try to build a reputation in the UK of calling out Tommy Fury, and he never has any intention of fighting him?
Right. I mean, never know. It could be. I mean, this kid and his brother are pretty master for trolls, if that's how you want to label them. They know how to turn the social media world upside down and say certain things. And like I think yesterday or today, I don't know if Jake Paul tweeted, current status, retired. So, and then all these media outlets started picking it up, like, oh, Jake Paul says he's retired from just by him putting that. I mean, you don't think he's just trolling people, just throwing it just to see what he can do, like, oh yeah, you guys are all going to write about this. Just, 15 letters that I write in a tweet, you guys are all going to write about this. So, it is what it is, but he's, I think hardcore boxing fans, even if some of our listeners hate that we're diving into this and talking about this, I mean, it's a part of boxing now. He's been doing it for, almost a little less than 2 years, close to 2 years, 18, 20 months or something like that. And he's putting real fights on the undercard, or at least Showtime is, or Steven Espinosa is. There's real fights on the undercard with real fighters. So, at least we get that. That's to satisfy the hardcore boxing base. And then their demographic, their audience is satisfied by the main event. So, hey, man, give some exposure to some real long-term fighters on the undercard, and it could work out. Speaking of that, also on this card, Amanda Serrano gets the unanimous decision win over Yamaleth Mercado, and Serrano retains her WBC, WBA, and IBO featherweight title. Abe, what'd you think about Serrano's win?
I'm going to tell you, Serrano is a beast. I mean, she does everything right, up and down, offense, brings the pressure. She's got that jab, footwork is on point. She's always she's never really like off balance. And she handled the business. Unfortunately, her corner's antics once again, kind of casted this dark cloud over her win, because her trainer / manager / brother-in-law, wants to run his mouth. And it's unfortunate because that's not needed. He had the same issue last time at Ring City, where he was in the corner and he got kicked out of the corner by the referee because he was arguing with the referee. When he was in the corner of his wife, Cindy Serrano, and she lost her last fight, he went to I can't remember, Katie Taylor, I think was the one that beat her, and started saying, hey, you might have won, but Amanda will whip your ass. Like, come on, dude. Like, this is like a common trend with him. And it's just unfortunate. Amanda Serrano is a beast, and I don't think there's anybody out there to beat her. I don't think Katie Taylor can beat her either.
I think Mike wants to respond to you on that. What do you think about what he just said, Mike?
No, she's a good fighter, and the corner team, like you said, just should have really have stopped the interview because he was just talking a load of trash when he just made himself look silly. But yeah, Katie Taylor beats her.
What? Okay, so we're gonna stick on this. We're gonna stick on this. So
she won't take the fight because she won't pass VADA. That's if we're going to be truthful.
Who? Serrano?
Yeah, the corner team. He's a known drug dealer. He got sent down for it. They raided the gym years ago, and he got done for drugs, didn't he?
Abe, what's your reaction to that? Because you picked Serrano and Mike's picking Katie Taylor. So what do you think, Abe?
So everything that Mike said are facts, right? That happened. There's no denying that. As far as all the steroid related stuff, all those incidents that happened. That's documented. Nobody can contest that. I think that the pressure that Serrano brings and how she fights and her style might be too much for Taylor. Not so much in the beginning, but in the middle to late rounds.
Mike, what do you think?
That is a good point. I mean, the fight that Katie Taylor struggled with was obviously Delphine Pursoon. And obviously Serrano's style is similar to that. Serrano is probably a cleaner, crisper, heavier puncher, but I just think she's maybe too small. And if Taylor doesn't get drawn into that sort of fight and decides to actually box, I think that's, her path to victory. But, hopefully we see it. I don't know whether from what you hear from Eddie Hearn and people like that, Serrano kind of really ducked out of the last fight, if you believe what he says. And DiBella, says that they kind of lowballed them. So, I don't know, just get it. At the end of the day, we don't really want to see any of the fights in and around those divisions for Serrano and Taylor. That's really the only path left.
Abe, do you think in regards to a potential clash between Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano, do you think we could see any correlation or any similarities to Sinisa Estrada and Marlena Esparza when they went at it?
You mean like as far as the promotion leading up to it?
Well, not just the promotion, but the actual fight itself.
I don't know. It's tough, man, because Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano are at a different level. You know what I mean? Them two and Larissa, and really that's it. They're at a different level above all these other champions, and as far as the women are concerned, so it's kind of hard to make a comparison. I just feel like it's a great fight. It should be a main event, and it'll probably be in the UK for it to be really big. If they don't do that, then New York City will probably fill up the Hulu Theater at the Garden, which is like 4,000 or 5,000. They could probably do that all day.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I think it would likely go to the UK.
I think New York would be good.
And I think
all the Irish contingent, and then obviously you've got all the Puerto Ricans and stuff like that. Taylor's fought there at least once or twice.
Right. Yeah. I mean, how long is the plane ride from the UK to New York, Mike?
I think it's 6 hours.
Yeah. So I could see that happening. It's like going from the West Coast to the East Coast here in the United States. So I could see that. But yeah, obviously that's probably, I mean, one last point on this. Would you say that, because nothing else is coming to my mind, but would you say at the moment that Amanda Serrano and Katie Taylor, a potential matchup, is probably the biggest fight in women's boxing at the moment?
100%. 100%. That's the biggest fight out there. Everybody knows that. Eddie knows that. Amanda knows that, which is why, she's, holding her position in asking for a certain amount of money, because she knows it's the biggest fight. And so it is. It absolutely is.
I think the Taylor Serrano fight would be, a good time for them to look at doing the 12-3s as well, because you could tell in this Serrano fight that if she'd have had an extra minute in some of the rounds, she'd have got rid of her. But the fact that 120 seconds, you can run for a lot of that time, and then, just kind of eke out the rest of the round. So I think, slowly moving to the 12-3, especially for a huge women's fight like that, would be, a good time to do it. We'll see more knockouts.
Right. Right. And then Abe, and obviously there was some news following this fight on Mercado and her condition. Do we have an update on her? I believe she is doing better. Have you heard anything?
No, I haven't heard anything outside of her going to the hospital. If it was anything really serious, then we probably would have heard something. But I think it was just kind of like a standard protocol thing. You know, she had a really swollen, I think it was left eye with the cut. And so it was probably just a normal protocol thing. It definitely wasn't the situation in Mexico with that one fighter that's in the ICU. It wasn't nothing like that.
Right. Yeah, it's good news because I saw some reports and we saw some news, and it didn't, like you said, we didn't hear any follow ups and anything. So no news is good news in a lot of cases. So moving on, Montana Love stops Ivan Baranchyk in 7 rounds. Mike made a good point in last week's episode, Abe, that he felt that Baranchyk, and I kind of agree with him, but like I believe I picked Baranchyk to win, but obviously he got stopped here. But Mike made the point that Baranchyk doesn't seem like he's the same fighter anymore, especially after his war with Zepeda on a Top Rank on ESPN card. What do you think about the matchup? And then what do you think about, Mike's opinion on Baranchyk?
Yeah. So the first thing that I had heard from Baranchyk was at the weigh-in, he didn't look right. That was the first thing I heard. They said stepping off the scale and even, stepping on, he just didn't look right. He didn't look like he was there at all. And that kind of got me a little worried, given his last fight with Zepeda. Then when he came into the ring, he just seemed like it was a shell of himself. Yeah, he was doing all the things that, dropping the big punches and, putting the pressure, but it just seemed like it was a shell of himself fighting. Montana Love, doing his thing, love his style. My problem with it is that he was acting a little too cute in there with certain instances where he would get a solid punch out and then not follow up. He definitely has the skills, but to fight a Tank Davis or a Josh Taylor, no. Let's give him about another year, another 3 to 5 fights, and then we'll revisit that. But he does have skills. He does have talent. I just think they need to reevaluate some things in the gym, and they need to kind of slow down that training a little bit.
Mike, what do you think about the matchup?
Yeah, no, I kind of agree. I think that Montana Love sometimes cares about looking too flashy and likes to admire his own work. Like he'll throw something real cute and it'll land and he's like, oh yeah, that was nice. Instead of like jumping in and actually following up, like Abe said. Baranchyk, I just don't know whether is he struggling with the weight? Is it just a mental thing about, the bad loss to Zepeda? Sometimes, boxers need to come back, have a couple of gimmies just to kind of, flush that out and regain their confidence. Whereas, Baranchyk kind of stepped right back into the fire. I don't know, like Abe said, if it was at the weigh-in, is he just struggling? Does he need to move up? Is he draining himself too much? So, time will tell, but Barancyk's always in good fights. He's definitely a TV fighter.
Right. Yeah. I mean, hopefully, it seems like this Zepeda fight took a lot out of him. And, I wasn't aware of what Abe just mentioned about him when as he was stepping on the scale or before he stepped on the scale, how he looked. So that's obviously a concern. But Montana Love, I did see how he becomes flashy or sometimes he doesn't capitalize on an opportunity and stuff like that. But I'm a fan. I'm a fan of the guy. I think he, especially marketing purposes, he has a great name. I think if he does keep winning and building his profile, his name is very marketable.
His backstory.
The backstory especially too is very marketable. So, I'm rooting for the kid. Hopefully he keeps doing it. I'm pretty sure he'll be back. Does he have Abe? Do we know, or Mike? Do we know if Montana Love has an agreement with Showtime or who's his? Does he have a promoter at the moment? Is he signed exclusively to somebody? Abe?
I don't know. I think he's with the PBC though.
Okay. That would make
but I don't think he has anything exclusive with Showtime now. It could have been a situation where this was a showcase for him, and it was like, hey, if you look good and generate enough buzz, we'll get you a deal, and headline some showbox cards or something like that moving forward.
Yeah, that's true. I could see that happening, definitely. Moving on, making his USA debut in the United States, Dynamite Daniel Dubois gets the first round TKO over Joe Cusimano. Abe, what'd you think about Dubois' US debut?
So I was a little surprised that Joe got taken out that fast. He did take the fight in 3 weeks' notice. Only had 12 rounds of sparring, but still, I thought he had a little more experience enough to go a few rounds. Looks like that one punch that was like right behind the ear or in that area is the one that rocked him, and he just couldn't recover after that. Dubois looked good. I don't know. Like, I'm not completely sold on Dubois. I haven't been since the beginning. I haven't been part of the Dubois hype train. I just feel like I need to see him against some like really, really solid heavyweights before I can jump on the train.
Mike, what'd you think about Dubois' win and the hype train behind him?
The win was kind of seemed like a pointless fight. Like, I'm sure he's had harder sparring. Like, was it worth flying him over and paying what they paid for him to get in and do that? He's not at the beginning of his career. I know he's kind of trying to rebuild since the Joe Joyce fight, but the kid just seemed kind of like a waste of time, to be honest with you. The hype train, maybe under Shane McGuigan. Originally, obviously, they just kind of fed him, gimmies to get him up there. Then obviously Joe Joyce kind of screwed all that up, just really using the jab, and just showed, how limited Daniel Dubois was, because he looked completely lost in that fight. I agree with Abe. I think at times he does look like a little bit lost. Like, he's a little bit robotic. He's not like a natural boxer, like where he could like solve a puzzle himself. I don't think, if something came up against him, I think he'd kind of rely on his trainer to try to tell him what to do. But in terms of a heavyweight, he's still young, very, very young. He's probably, further ahead, than he should be in terms of talent, because he's picking up those trinkets, from the WBA. I think it was the WBA interim or whatever it was, which he's now lost because obviously they took him all away. But slowly but surely, like the crop of heavyweights that we've got, can fight on for a few years and retire, and Dubois will still be here, and he'll just be hitting his prime in terms of, what we class as a heavyweight's prime's age, 28, 29, 30.
See, I can understand both of your sentiments on it. And I know how Abe, because I've met other people with Abe's similar opinion, that they're like, I need to see him fight, more experienced guys. I'm not really on the train. I don't really understand it. I've met other people in the boxing world who have said something similar. See, but I don't, it's not that I don't see that, but like, I like the kid, and I think how about Mike mentioned his age. What is he, 24, 25? Yeah. And he's likely more ahead of the curve at this point in his career than somebody else would be. I know he lost to Joe Joyce, which is, his most significant fight to date, which was unfortunately a loss for him, the first loss of his professional career. But, I think he was doing okay in that fight. He had some moments and stuff, except Joe Joyce was just, like they call him the juggernaut, and just kept coming at him. But I think I remember talking about that fight immediately after, I believe in that week's episode, where I think I said, well, I think, the most bang for your buck long term in the years to come is still going to be Dubois because of his age. I think his age is the biggest key in everything right now. He's a big guy. He obviously he's a muscle guy. He kind of resembles like an Anthony Joshua, and I'm sure Frank Warren sees that. And if he can keep winning, especially as he steps up in competition. Obviously, he lost in his first big step up, but you kind of bring him back, rebuild him. I know he talked about following this fight, maybe a Trevor Bryan. So if he, I agree with the sentiment how Abe said, we need to see him in there with more experienced guys. Yeah, well, yeah, of course. We need to see any fighter at one point or another with the more experienced talent in and around their weight division. But I think, like I keep going back to it, his age, where he's at in his age, and where he's at on his career path. I think it's a major key. What do you think, Abe? What do you think about what I said?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I just think that his team should probably just slow down, like the marketing behind him, right, and the promotion behind him. Just slow it down a little bit. He can be the guy once, like you said, once that wave of heavyweights that's at the top of the game move on, because they're past their 30s, right? And so once they move on in the next year or two, then he could be part of that group with the big baby Andersons and all of those guys. So I just think that they just have to be patient with him and just keep giving him these fights where he's developing his skills, learning on the job kind of thing, gaining the wins, getting the confidence, and then maybe he could take out one of those older guys a year or two from now.
Yeah, that's exactly my mindset. I was like, maybe he could get away with not fighting these Wilders, Furies, Anthony Joshuas, because they got him by like 5, 6, 7 years. Wilders got him by quite a few years actually. So those guys are kind of on the latter half of their careers. They're going to be phased out, and Dubois is going to be able to slide in with the next crop. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. Moving on that card, Charles Conwell, he's been on the show before, 16-0, remains undefeated with the third round TKO over Juan Carlos Rubio. Abe, what'd you think about Conwell's TKO win?
So from the video cameras that captured some of the clips and the 15 seconds that Showtime showed it looked like he did his thing. Seemed like a stay busy fight for Charles Conwell. He should be fighting for like an interim title, maybe not WBA, but he needs to be fighting the big names like right now. Like there's no more feeding him these guys. He needs to be fighting the bigger names right now. It's just as simple as that. He's ready for those opportunities, and I think the time is now.
Who would you see as a realistic opponent if it is a big name for a Conwell? Let's just say in his next 2 fights, who would be one of those names that you think would work?
I would probably put him against J-Rock. I think that would be a great fight. Put him against J-Rock. I mean, the Jarrett Hurd fight is out there. If Hurd can make 154, I know Conwell had expressed interest in me that he wanted that fight at one point. So, but I think the J-Rock fight is more of a really barometer to where he's really at, and I think that'd be a good fight.
Mike, what do you think?
I agree with Abe again. Really, I think he needs to, step on. I think he's just one of those guys that, for some reason, maybe just because he doesn't have a huge following, he kind of just flies under the radar, and his promotion just don't really push him like too much. But that would be a big step up, really to kind of see where he's at. The J-Rock fight, but it's just one of those fights where it's everything to gain for Conwell, whereas J-Rock's like, hell no, I'm not fighting that guy, because obviously, if he loses to that, then that's him kind of done really up at the world level. It's one of those fights, like a crossroads fight for J-Rock.
Yeah, I could see that. Do you agree with that, Abe? That in regards to J-Rock, it would be a crossroads fight?
I think it would be. I just think that it'll have to come down to Al Heyman making it worth J-Rock's while, right? Maybe overpaying him a little bit to get him in the ring with Conwell. I think that's the only way that works out. We haven't seen J-Rock fight. It's going to be 2 years soon, and so that window of opportunity is closing really fast, and before you know it, he might be out of the ring. Maybe his 3-year mark before he gets back in the ring. So it's just it's going to really depend on if they can pay him the right amount of money to get him back in the ring with a guy like Conwell. If not, then they're going to have to figure out another plan.
Rounding off the card, Tommy Fury, who we touched on earlier today, also remains undefeated at 7-0 with the 4-round decision over Anthony Taylor. Obviously, Tommy Fury is now him and Jake Paul have been mentioned as, potential opponents of each other, and now they're calling each other out, and, they've been going back and forth social media and all that. Abe, what'd you think about Fury's decision win and, his potential, not only as a potential opponent for Jake Paul in the future, but his potential as a professional boxer going forward?
I mean, in that fight, I feel like he had an opportunity to get that guy out of there before the decision. He just couldn't put his punches together to do that. In regards to his future, man, I think that he should probably get as many of these type of wins that he can, get that ad money, get his face on a GQ magazine or a billboard in the UK, collect all that money now, because the minute he fights a legit heavyweight, he's going to be staring up at the lights, plain and simple.
What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, you could kind of see in this fight where Tommy Fury really is limited in some sort of things. I mean, he should really have taken someone like Anthony Taylor out of there, especially with it being on Showtime, and they were trying to obviously put together that fight with Jake Paul. He really needed to go over there and make a statement and get in there with this guy who was 0-1. It looked like they'd done that for him. It looked like they'd given him the perfect opponent. He was taller, had a longer reach. Everything was really in his favor, but he couldn't get the job done on the night. And he said before and after how brilliant a camp he had. So there was nothing really in there apart from just his boxing skills and boxing IQ that stopped that happening.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think I kind of agree that, maybe he's not going to be what people think he's going to be, or maybe they don't think he's going to be that. But for the good of the sport, we better hope that he becomes something good. Because what if he does with the following that he already has, and he's continuing to build, especially in the UK? I agree with Abe saying, well, if he steps up eventually, if he gets to that point, he fights a top heavyweight, he's going to be looking up at the lights. I agree with that. But then there's a part of me that says, like, well, what if he pans out? What that percentage, that specific percentage that's there that might have him pan out, because then he brings eyeballs. Well, I think we talked a few years ago when we started the show. I think we talked about Ryan Garcia like that in a similar fashion, and I might have said something similar. I was like, well, the kid gets a lot of heat because of his social media presence and everything, and this and that. I was like, but he's gained a lot of attention. It's only growing. And so far, he keeps winning, unfortunately, he hasn't fought this year, and it doesn't seem like he might fight before the end of the year. We're not sure. But if, he keeps winning, coming out the biggest win in his career, and he keeps bringing more eyeballs to the sport, he keeps bringing more attention. People see him, and they're like, oh, he's a professional fighter. I want to see when he fights. And then they bring eyeballs to these events. I think it's a longer shot for Tommy Fury at the moment, but if he pans out, it's good for us. It's good for us in terms of our mediums where we talk about boxing on a weekly basis here. And even for Abe, how at nyfights.com, I know, like I talked about earlier, I'm sure there's a lot of people, maybe some of our listeners who aren't fans of us talking about these YouTuber fights or Jake Paul, Logan Paul, stuff like that. But it's gained a lot of traction in the sport, and it's not only in boxing media sites, but it's in the mainstream. The mainstream is covering these events. Right, Abe? What do you think about that?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I think Tommy Fury is going to be Tommy Morrison 2.0, and he's going to get Ray Mercered by somebody.
Yeah. No, yeah.
But you're right, though. These guys are moving the needle, man. Right now, it's always been a business, right? Who can bring in the money? if you're the guy that's bringing in the money, the advertisement dollars, the sponsorships, hey man, everybody's going to be, rooting for you all the way to the end, especially on the promotion network side. So as long as these guys keep doing what they're doing and being relevant in their respective spaces, they're going to keep getting these opportunities.
Exactly. It's a business at the end of the day, above all. Moving on, fight previews this upcoming Saturday, the 4th of September, from the Headingley. Did I say it right, Mike?
Headingley.
I'm sorry, I totally botched that. From the Headingley Rugby League Stadium in Leeds on DAZN, Mauricio Lara and Josh Warrington meet for the second time in their rematch. Abe, what do you think about this rematch?
Man, I like it. I like it a lot. I wanna get behind Warrington and feel like he's going to pull this one out. I just don't know. Sometimes when somebody has your number, they got your number, and so I don't know. It's an interesting fight. I want to see how this one plays out and how Warrington bounces back from that last fight.
Mike, what do you think about the matchup?
It's an interesting one because most of the time when you get like a champion like Josh Warrington at the time, well, he'd given it up, but he was, obviously the number one, facing someone like Lara, it wasn't a lucky punch or a lucky round. Lara absolutely dominated him from the whole fight. So it's kind of one of those things where you got, if you were Warrington, you got to look at it. There was no, not even a round I can remember where you think, what, Josh did well there. There was a glimpse. There was something to him to work from. So he really needs to go back and just look at, what happened last time, if it was a bad camp or whether he just took, Lara lightly because he wasn't a known fighter at the time. But yeah, if you go back and you watch the last fight, Lara absolutely dominated him, and it should have probably have been stopped earlier.
I agree with what Abe said, that Mauricio Lara probably just has Josh Warrington's number. And sometimes you just meet a guy or a gal, for that matter, who they just have your number for some reason. And I go back to last week's guest. We had professional cutman Mike Rodriguez on, who just did some cutman services for Manny Pacquiao, but he does cutman services for pretty much all of the sport. He's all over the place all the time. And we were talking about something, and he was talking, I believe he touched on Vernon Forrest, how Shane Mosley could never beat Vernon Forrest, whether it was in the amateurs or in the pros. Kind of the same thing. Vernon Forrest had Shane Mosley's number. Mosley just could never beat him. And I think going back to Abe's sentiment with that, I think I'm kind of leaning towards that Lara has Warrington's number. And Abe, what do you think that if Warrington does win, do we see a trilogy? Who knows how the contracts are constructed here for this second bout, but if Warrington wins, do we see a trilogy, or do you think Warrington tries to go another direction because he doesn't want to do a trilogy with this guy because he knows there's a potential to lose again?
I think that the public will probably push for a third fight, but we'll see Warrington kind of go elsewhere.
Do you think that would happen, Mike?
I think money talks at the end of the day. If we go and we have like a last minute knockout by Warrington, or just a 12-round war where the fans, stand up and applaud at the end, and, Eddie Hearn can see, that it's going to make a lot of money, then yeah. But the problem you have as well, or the good thing for Warrington, I guess, is a lot of the belts are now in the UK. You got Lee Wood won one, Kid Galahad won one. So you've got a lot of titles in the UK that they can have some domestic dust-ups, do a little round robin. You could go and try and win back the IBF, which Kid Galahad now has, or that version of the WBA that Lee Wood has. Right.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point. So we'll see, but it's a very intriguing matchup, obviously, coming off their last bout. Obviously, Warrington is looking for some revenge because I believe he was a favorite in the first fight. So it was a big surprise to a lot of us when Lara pulled it out there. So this is definitely probably going to be the most intriguing fight of this weekend, at least for me. Also on the card, Conor Benn, 18-0, goes up against Adrian Granados for the WBA Continental Welterweight title. I like this matchup. I think this is a pretty decent matchup as well. What do you think about this matchup, Abe?
Man, Conor Benn, he's a guy that, people are really getting behind. I think this is a good matchup for him at this stage of his career, kind of gauging where he's at, fighting Adrian Granados. I don't think it goes 12 rounds. I think he stops him. He stops Granados probably before the 6th. But I want to see more of Conor Benn, and I think this is the right fight at the right time for him.
Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, they're definitely matching him, really well. I think they've seen that, his performances, the way that he is, just like super intense that people seem to like. Using that Conor Benn name, taking it from his dad, Nigel Benn. I think they're going to keep matching him really, really well because they're already kind of talking about, if and when he beats Granados, they're trying to get the Adrian Broner fight, which would be great. The build up to that would be amazing to watch. But the champions in that welterweight division, I don't see him beating. I don't see him beating like a Jaron Ennis down the line, a Virgil Ortiz. I think he kind of just survives on brawling, really. He's more than a boxer. And I think when he fights somebody that, a boxer move, I think is when you'll see the limitations of Conor Benn.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with what you just said, Mike. Who knows how he'll pan out. But I guess, going back to what I keep saying about like when we talked about Ryan Garcia and Tommy Fury, he has that Benn last name, son of Nigel Benn. And obviously Nigel Benn, especially in the UK, was a pretty significant name over there during his time in the ring. So that obviously gives him a leg up in terms of publicity, in the sport of boxing. So, we'll see. I know Granados has been in there with like Danny Garcia and I believe Sean Porter. Am I wrong? Was he in there with Sean Porter, or am I wrong about that?
Granados?
Was it Abe? Was it? Or am I thinking of something else? I know it was Danny Garcia, right?
I know he was in the ring with Danny Garcia. I'm trying to remember. It might have been with Sean Porter. I'm not. I'd have to look it up on BoxRec, but I was there for the Danny Garcia fight. And Danny Garcia just tore him apart.
Right. Yeah. So, he's been in there with some pretty significant names in boxing, but, we'll see, kind of going back to what we talked about Baranchik, are those fights just taking more out of him as he goes on in these subsequent fights, which, happens, it's common and it does happen. And some fighters just aren't able to find that same gas pedal again. So we'll see. Moving on that fight, Katie Taylor, Mike's favorite fighter, 18-0, goes up against Jennifer Hahn for the WBC, WBA, and IBF and WBO lightweight world titles. Abe, what do you think about this matchup?
Katie Taylor, 12-round decision, or 10-round decision, I should say. I'm sorry, 10-round decision. She's going to make it look easy in there, and just set up whatever potential mega fight later on in the year or on the top of the year.
What do you think, Mike?
Easy work, just a little warm up before she smokes Amanda Serrano.
Hey, if that fight gets made, you're definitely coming back, Abe. So you guys can go at it for a good hour on here. We're definitely going to do that. Moving on that card, Giovanni Straffone, hopefully I said that right, 24-3-1, goes up against Maxie Hughes, 23-5-2 for the IBO lightweight world title. And also Hope Price, 5-0, goes up against Zahid Hussein, 16-1 for the vacant IBO super bantamweight title. And then the Blonde Bomber, Ebony Bridges, returns at 6-1 and goes up against Malice Gangloff. Abe, on Ebony Bridges, obviously she's very popular on the social media channels, especially on Twitter. She's very good at at engaging with people, responding. She seems like she understands the whole marketing aspect of how to promote herself. How important is that in the fight game? Obviously, we know it's important, but what would you tell a young fighter about something like that? If they just say, "Oh, I let my hands do my talking in the ring." I mean, obviously that could work, but how would in regards to somebody like Ebony Bridges, what she does, how would you be talking to a young fighter if they ask you for advice on something like that?
Yeah, I mean, in this current boxing world, just economy period, you have to be active on social media, have to be active in the community, do all those things, check all those boxes in order for you to become some sort of star. Ebony Bridges is a smart woman. I don't know her personally, but I see her movements and she moves very smartly. She's not signed to a big promoter. She has good looks. She has a body of a model, right? And or a fitness person, right? Fitness model. And she used that initially to gain people's attention, right? Which I'm not mad at it. You got it, fine. She gained people's attention. Then she said to herself, once she has everybody's attention, it was up to her to perform and keep everybody's attention to go to the next level. And she did that in her last fight where, she had an eye nearly closed and, even though she lost, she won. She probably won more than the person that won the fight, if that makes sense. She gained so much respect from not only the casual fans, but the people that write and cover boxing. They're like, hey, this girl can fight. She's got heart. She's all about it. Now she's at a point where she not only has the casuals, but she has the purists as well. And now she's got this momentum going up. And now it's up to her to continue to perform in the ring in order for her to keep building that stardom.
What do you think about this matchup for Ebony Bridges, Mike? And then obviously what Abe just mentioned about her.
Yeah, I think it's a good matchup for Ebony. I think they're trying to position her, to have a rematch with Shannon Courtney when they fought for the vacant WBA. Obviously, she came back during fight camp, beat Beck Connolly, and then obviously now she's got another chance against Gandalf the Grey, and so hopefully she'll go 7-1, and then we'll see the rematch for between her and Shannon Courtney. But yeah, like Abe was saying, she knows the business. She knows she's relative to obviously 2021. She understands that social media is huge, and just looking at like Jake Paul, Tommy Fury, like we spoke about before, Logan Paul, they're where they are earning the money that they are because of the fact of social media. Nobody would be in the position of Jake Paul or probably even Tommy Fury with the amount of fights that they've had, earning the money that they are, if it was just based on how many fights you've had. It's to do with, selling tickets, social media. Ryan Garcia is obviously a good example. They earn ridiculous amounts of money, probably more than their talent, due to the fact that people want to see them.
Touching on that, and that's something that I forgot to mention earlier when we were talking about the Jake Paul Showtime card. There was, and I don't know if it's been confirmed. I don't know if there's any confirmation or any reputable source that has said this, but we saw some chatter. We saw the disclosed purses. I believe that was reported for the event. But then there was also something that was put out there. It didn't seem like it really had any credibility, but saying that Jake Paul used some of his payday to pay the other fighters on the card to give them more money. Abe, did you see that? And is there any credibility to any of that you've seen or heard?
Yeah, I saw that. I asked around about the validity of it, and people, no one can say with a straight face if that was legit or not. I don't think it is. If it is, that just means that Jake got that much more money through another avenue, as far as like advertising or whatever, to make up for the money that he gave them, or it could be a tax write-off, whatever the case may be. But I don't know. I don't think that's necessarily true. But who knows? I don't think we will ever know for sure. It's almost like trying to figure out what these fighters make in Las Vegas on top of whatever reported purses they get. Those casino envelopes aren't documented. So
Right.
So who knows, man? Who knows? But I don't think. I don't know. If you ask me, I don't think it was true. But you just never know. If it is true, good on him for that. Maybe he's trying to kind of, do that to find, to earn a spot in the business so that people can respect. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't really see any validity to it at the moment. But if we see something sourced or credible in the coming days about it, well, maybe then it could be potentially true. But at the moment, it just seems like it was somebody just throwing something out there to stir the pot a little bit at the moment. News and notes of this week's episode of The Last Round. I think Mike touched on this earlier as well, but the WBA officially vacates all interim titles. Some former titleists have already been ordered to face higher ranked opponents. Abe, they haven't. WBA hasn't done everything that they should be doing, but is this a step in the right direction? And when you heard this news, what did you think? What was your reaction?
So I think it is a step in the right direction. Unfortunately, it came from, them dropping the ball severely on the one card a couple weeks back. I just feel like, this could have been done when they said they were going to do it 4 years ago, when they put out a statement saying they were going to minimize the titles, and they never did. So, but now it seems like they're doing some type of action. What I will be interested in seeing is if these fights actually get made, and what happens after that. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes. I mean, the WBA seemed like this was a reaction and a way to still be relevant, because they saw the writing on the wall and the possibility of them just being irrelevant, and maybe the fighters just dumping their belts, and they were trying to avoid that. So this was like the quick remedy. They felt like this would satisfy the masses if they did it this way.
Mike, what do you think?
No, I agree. I think it got to the point where they were hearing it from so many different areas. The fans, obviously, the Fight Disciples podcast had been all over. There'd been the belts campaign. I think, all that kind of taking off, they decided that they were going to do it. But a year, 2 years from now, I can see them slowly sneaking them back in because it earns them money. So,
yeah, I mean, we'll see. We'll see. Obviously, going forward, if it sustains itself, or when the luster dies down from the backlash that they received, do they sneak it back in? It's PR. Sometimes that happens at PR. They take it away because it's too hot right now. There's too much heat. And then when the heat goes down and the luster goes down, the attention span goes down, they kind of bring it back in, So that happens in a lot of places. But we'll see. I mean, it is a step in the right direction, as we just mentioned. So hopefully it stays like that, or they continue to improve going forward. And then final note, as we get to the last lap here on the last round, this week's episode. Breaking news today: Oscar Valdez has failed a VADA test ahead of his planned September 10th bout against Robson Conceicao. Mike Coppinger of ESPN initially reported that Valdez tested positive for phentermine. Abe, when you saw this news, what was your reaction? And then what do you think happens going forward with Valdez? And I don't think there's been a B sample, right?
No. So initially, when Mike put it out and then had to kind of take it back and change the substance that he popped positive for. He caught a lot of backlash from that.
Mm-hmm.
He's the scoops guy, right? And so being at ESPN, he's been firing off more scoops than Ryu throws fireballs on a Street Fighter game. So he's been doing it, and I think that at times, like, you always want to be in this line of work, you always want to be like the first guy, right, to put things out. But I felt like for this specific situation, it was probably best to kind of wait and see to find out exactly what was going on. It's a sticky situation because I'm no chemist. I don't know, all of these different liquids and all these different combinations and mixtures, and you can test for this and this is for that. I don't know any of that stuff. All I know is that if you take something and it's on the ban list and you pop, it's a bad thing, and that's exactly what happened here. Now, his lawyer said something about it was in the tea, and I don't know. Mike Woods posted a story at nyfights.com. He spoke to Aaron. Aaron was kind of going along with the tea stuff. He also blasted Mike Coppinger on the article as well, so you can read about that. But it's just it's a mess. The WBC put out a statement saying that they're going to make a ruling, I guess, as soon as possible, probably tomorrow. The place where they're going to have to fight, they're going to make a ruling as well. I think we still get the fight. I just feel like if you're a fighter and you're going through these tests and everything, man, just drink water, man. Drink water, eat vegetables, and stay away from tainted meat.
Exactly. Yeah. Mike, you had mentioned earlier when we learned about this news earlier in the day, that bodybuilders use it, or was that the diuretic? What were we talking about earlier?
That was the diuretic when they said it was a diuretic.
Okay, so that's what Abe was mentioning it with Mike Coppinger of ESPN, how he initially reported it was a diuretic, and then he tweeted a subsequent tweet. He quote tweeted it saying, "Correction, that it was actually phentermine." I mean, we don't know if Coppinger. Obviously, he has to get this information. I mean, did he get this straight from somebody? Did somebody tell him, like, oh, okay, it was a diuretic, or did he get like a memo? Did he get like an email forwarded to him that had that, and then somebody said, oh, actually we corrected it. It's actually phentermine. I don't think he's mentioned what happened with that, so who knows? So I mean, like, Abe could we really blame? Obviously, we don't know. We're just speculating here, but you've gotten some scoops before. You've gotten some information in the boxing world before. I mean, have you ever gotten scoops from a source or from people in the boxing world, and then you put it out there, and then they tell you like a couple hours later or the next day, like, oh, sorry, I thought it was this. It was actually this. Has that ever happened to you?
It's happened to me before, probably more so along the lines of, oh, I wasn't supposed to say that just yet type of thing. And then I end up deleting the tweet or whatever. But I think it happens. It's just when you're talking about, Oscar Valdez and who he is with, right? With the Reynosos, and, him coming off of this big win against Miguel Berchel. I just personally feel like he probably should have waited a little bit because of all those things I just mentioned, and wait to see, how it plays out. Now, that probably meant him being second to putting it out there, because somebody else would have put it out. But I think he would have gotten it right the first time if he would have done that.
Right. And then Coppinger also put out a tweet. He got a quote from Victor Conte that said, quote, I personally have given athletes phentermine. It is very powerful. You know why it's performance enhancing. It gives you stamina. It makes it easier to breathe, end quote. What do you think about that statement from Victor Conte, Abe?
I mean, you should know, right? I mean, the thing is that, he knows the ins and outs of those things. Sometimes, I'm not going to say all the time, but sometimes when you hear those type of things, you just don't know where it's coming from, what place it's coming from. It could be a genuine place, or it could be a place of maybe, he had a disagreement with somebody from his team or from the promotion, in the past. And so, he's kind of a little more motivated to put it out there because he knows somebody's going to call him about it. Not saying that's the case. You just never know, right? You don't know where the place he's coming from with that information. But from what he's saying, it seems like it's legit. Again, I'm no chemist. I don't deal with, liquids and pills and all that. So I would probably defer to somebody who has, and he has. So there's that.
Yeah, exactly. Mike, what do you think about what Victor Conte said? And then, he maintains that it wasn't herbal tea. He maintains that it was taken willingly. What do you think about that?
I believe Victor Conte, I think there's more chance that, he's a boxer, he's a professional athlete, and they were, trying to do something to control his weight for a fight, and obviously he got caught in the story.
Yeah. And then one last point on this, Abe, one last question. What do you think? How does this reflect on somebody like Eddie Reynoso, who's obviously been through this situation, obviously on a bigger level with Canelo Alvarez a couple of years ago. Now it's another fighter under his stable. How does this reflect on him?
To be honest with you, I don't even think he cares. Not in the sense of the situation. I just think that stuff like that, he'll just brush it off. I think it'll affect Valdez's psyche more than anything else, because he's, people went off on the timeline, and if this fight does go, they're gonna go off and continue all the way up to that fight happens. So it's gonna mess with his psyche more than anything else.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's a psyche thing. I think Eddie Reynoso is still going to go forward with his fighter and his stable. But, obviously, Abe, we appreciate your time. Join us here on the last round here for the second time in a row. Before we sign off completely here for this week's episode, go ahead and let our listeners know where they can find your work and keep up with your all your publications. Where can they find you, man?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at AbeG718. All my articles are on nyfights.com. And I appreciate you guys for having me on and giving me this opportunity to be a guest on your show.
No worries. Absolutely. Anytime you want, man. And Mike, obviously our go-to here as we sign off here, we'll tell the fans where they can find us and follow us.
We're at The Last Round 12 on Instagram and Twitter. And be sure to join us next week. We'll be hopefully reviewing the Valdez fight and then looking forward to Sunday Edwards against Jason Mama.
Hopefully. So for this week's special guest here on The Last Round, and Abraham Lopez, managing editor and writer for nyfights.com. For my co-host, Michael Shepard, I'm Danny Z. This is The Last Round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Last Round Podcast.